Howdy, howdy, howdy. Welcome to another episode of Baked in the Cake, the podcast where we explore what is too ingrained in our minds to get out. Maybe you would equate it to the egg yolk in a cake that you cannot extract out because we are too set in our ways. And with me today, I have my co-host, DJ Castilleja.
Hello. Good morning.
And we are excited to be here. We are back on track. More of our... more consistent. Yeah, there we go. More consistent. Feels good. I think we'll definitely be at least every other week and hopefully increase it from there.
It'll be interesting to see where we go this morning because we really don't have a complete set out plan. We're going to have just a conversation, which is what this podcast is about, just talking. We have interesting conversations. Even before turning the mics on, we were having a conversation that to some extent I wish was recorded because I think it's things that people try to come to grips with.
Yeah.
You know, and we don't always see it eye to eye, but, you know, and our opinions might not matter much, but, you know, it's real conversation.
Yep. It is real. It's real conversation. And as I'm thinking of it, I think our topics today that we make shift or just randomly switch to are great examples of, you know, people being baked in the cake and thinking the same way their entire lives, and you know, things we can't question. As the great Tom Woods would put it, the 3x5 index card of unallowable opinion or of allowable opinion. He burns the cards of allowable opinion.
I'm not sure what that's referencing.
I said Tom Woods. That's who.
Who's that?
Oh, he's I thought you knew who Tom. He's a libertarian.
Is he a golfer?
Idol. I don't know. He's he's led many people to libertarian movement.
Oh, okay.
And he has a podcast, and it's only 30 minutes, and he'll teach you one thing every day or so about libertarianism. But of allowable opinion, because the topics that we have coming up here, I don't have the typical allowable opinion on.
Well, yeah, I think talking about current events, I think it's at least good to acknowledge that how we hear those events is probably skewed.
Oh, yeah.
How we come across it because of media today.
Yeah.
And, you know, I think we all know a little bit, but we're not experts. I'm not, like, if we talk about, like, the current events, like the impeachment that's going on right now, I'm not a political expert. And so, you know, a lot of this, you know, maybe hold lightly. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I try not to just regurgitate what I've been told, even by the people who tell me, you know, like, to not regurgitate what I've been told, because then I tend to just regurgitate what they tell me instead.
Right.
And but it is true when we look at the impeachment specifically that with if you have a libertarian viewpoint, it gives you what feels like political X-ray vision.
Okay, explain that.
So you can just see, so if a Republican and a very conservative, straightforward Republican and a Democrat, and not even a super liberal Democrat, but just a normal Democrat, a centrist Democrat, have a conversation about the impeachment, they're going to argue a lot. And they're going to argue specifics. They're going to, on a micro level, they're going to get into this debate. And I tend to my argument, if I am to engage, is going to supersede. I'm like, this micro perspective is not helpful. I was like, it's like I have a macro perspective, and I can see straight through their bullcrap. And
what's your macro perspective say about
impeachment? Well, the reason that kind of gives you that it's even possible to have a macro perspective, because I think you can have it and not be libertarian, is that you don't have a dog in the fight.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, okay. I mean, like, when you don't have a dog in the fight, you don't care. Like when you don't care if Trump's actually impeached. I think he should be tried for war crimes. I think he should go to jail. But is this impeachment specifically a good reason? No.
Yeah, I hold to a similar view in that I mostly consider myself apolitical.
Yeah.
Like I really, in the big scope of things, it really doesn't matter what takes place politically, in my opinion. And I think even biblically, I don't think it really matters.
Yeah.
Because we as Christians, we should be focused on more important things of the kingdom. And so I mostly watch things like the impeachment apolitically. Like again, like you, I don't have a dog in the fight.
Yeah.
It's entertaining to watch political processes take place, and impeachment's pretty rare that it's entertaining. That look at this event that's taking place.
Yeah, it is rare.
And I mean, to have fun, I have opinions on it, which I think we can probably get into a little bit, but other than that, I'm not going to hold my opinions, with a death grip. I hold them loosely.
Well, I always have two opinions. I do usually have a practical opinion on what we should do, kind of on a micro level in the situation. And then you have your anarcho-capitalist libertarian opinion, which is in a perfect world, in this philosophy and ideology, this is what would happen, so you can separate the two. So when people ask me my opinion on something, I try to give them both. I say I would rather have, let's say, borders is a good one. I would love for the entire border wall to be privately funded, and the people who own the land around it they're the ones who are in charge of policing who comes in and out, and it's their land, it's their responsibility, it's private property. Now, that is not the world we live in.
Right.
That is not the most...
We're not in a dream state.
Yeah, we're not. That is not the most... I don't want to say
realistic.
Applicable. Realistic, yeah, realistic thing. Now, there is 3 miles of private border fence going up, but 3 miles compared to what's needed, and, this unique migrant scenario we're in, that is not... we need a quick fix. We can't change. Well, what I'm talking about is a massive culture change, and we need a solution right now too. We need to do something now, even though it's not.
I think we're so baked in the cake, like politically and as a culture in the United States. Like to me, I say forget about it. These ideals.
Well, that's what I'm kind of saying with the impeachment is that there are so many better reasons to impeach Donald Trump. There's so many better. Why would they choose this? Why? What's the deal? It doesn't make sense to me.
Okay, so in regards to the impeachment, since the impeachment of Donald Trump, it's taking place right now. Where do you stand? Should he be impeached? Should he not?
He should not be impeached.
I agree. He should not be impeached.
Yes,
and it's not because I like Donald Trump.
No, I don't care about him at all.
And I guess the reason that I don't think he should be impeached is because it just doesn't seem like the evidence is there that catches him red-handed. A lot of people talk and say things, but because we're so politically driven.
Well, if Biden wasn't running for president, would they have a case?
Right, because he wouldn't be a political rival.
Yeah. But, if you were, should he still put pressure on them to investigate what was going on? I would say yes. And even if, so what's crazy is that what he's doing is done by politicians all the time.
Who's doing?
What Donald Trump did.
Right.
Theoretically.
Right.
It's done by politicians all the time, at every level. It's just in maybe one small scenario, they think they can get it to where it's technically not legal or this or that.
Well, the big problem I have with the whole thing is that it's the conversation has been going on ever since he was elected.
Yeah.
And and I have to admit that I was more on the Democrat side for the election.
Really?
Yeah.
I was so for Trump at that time. I was.
At that time, I wasn't,
Oh wow.
and mostly based on just the open character of him.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, and so I tend to want to talk more about the issues rather than choose a journal side.
Well-
like I'm all Republican. Well, yes and no. I agree with more on the stuff on the more issues on the right side than I do on the left.
Yeah.
And I'd like to see Trump not impeached, not because I like him, or if we could change him out with a better representative
Yeah.
on the right, then I'd be in favor of that.
Yeah. Well,
but realistically, he's the guy that better represents the issues that I agree with.
well, to me, it seems like political suicide for the Democratic Party.
Me too.
But I think they already know that they've lost. So typically, what happens? They're looking at elections right now. They're not looking about. They don't really care if it's a good reason for him to be impeached. So whenever you're talking about elections, the reason Donald Trump won, or one of the factors, I don't want to say the reason, there's a lot of reasons.
Right.
One of the factors that Donald Trump won is because he got more people to vote. He didn't get Democrats to vote Republican, and Obama didn't get Republicans to vote Democrat. And if that happens, the number is so small, it doesn't matter. The way you win an election is you rile up your base. So
And he's great at doing that.
Well, impeachment is something that you could say riles up the Democrats' base. Maybe they're looking at it like at that. I think it's far more successful at riling up Donald Trump's base for him.
Even like I said, when in 2016, when Donald Trump was running, I was more middle of the road, and now I am so against what the House did, basically the Democrats, because they're the majority.
That you might go vote for Donald Trump.
I'm even more conservative now.
Just to spite them.
Well, because it's a complete waste of time. It's like, okay, in the broad view, we're paying our Congress right now to do nothing.
Oh yeah,
because the Democrats and Republicans both know that he's not going to get convicted.
It's all dog and pony show.
And so, what the Democrats wanted to do, in my opinion, is that they wanted to tag impeached this. Donald Trump is an impeached president. Mm-hmm. Nancy Pelosi came out and said he's impeached forever. And so he's going to, So in my eyes, I want to see Donald Trump be reelected as an impeached president to show how much.
Well, he was elected. Donald Trump right now. This is the way I like to describe him. He is a walking middle finger to the establishment. He is a huge screw you, what you've done for the past, especially 50 years in American government. That's what he is. And he campaigned on it. He says the establishment is out to get you. They don't care about what you want. They don't care about anything that you do. They don't care about the working class. They claim they do, but they're rich billionaires and millionaires with security. They want to take away your guns so you can't protect yourself.
Right.
He campaigns on all of that. And then the Democrats go ahead and say, all right, everyone who voted for the duly elected Donald Trump, what you say doesn't matter. We're going to impeach him. We're going to go past the elections that we had for everyone that voted for him, and you are too dumb. You're too dumb. You don't know what's good for you. And they're verifying everything he campaigned on.
Well, this is 4 years later. We're in 2020.
Yeah.
And they've been working on this. The Democrats have been working on this since he got elected. From almost day one, it's been about getting him out of office. And so they've literally done nothing, for 4 years, their goal is to get him impeached.
Yeah.
And they've tried various avenues. They're trying to, get him associated with the porn star, Stormy Daniels. And then Russia and the Mueller report. And then now it's Ukraine. It's like, enough already.
Mm-hmm.
And the fascinating thing is that it seems like Donald Trump's actually doing something
Yeah.
and accomplishing stuff,
Yeah.
even though it's not maybe like what he said, like the border wall, Mexico's
Yeah.
going to pay for it. No, he didn't, but at least he's doing something.
Well, this is what always just blows my mind. So Donald Trump has donated money to Hillary Clinton before.
Mm-hmm.
It was like over $100,000. He is Bill Clinton from the 90s. That's who Donald Trump is.
Mm-hmm.
His policies on almost everything is Bill Clinton from the 90s. If anything, he's more liberal. Bill Clinton in the 90s did support gay marriage, Hillary Clinton in 2008 didn't support gay marriage. And Donald Trump supports gay marriage.
Mm-hmm.
Donald Trump has gotten more gun control done than Bill Clinton did. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
he is more liberal than Bill Clinton from the 90s. But economically, his stance on economics, he doubled down a lot of the stuff that Bill Clinton did. He didn't do Bill Clinton didn't do any tax cuts, but like artificially low interest rates and things like that. Like he's doing a lot of things that the same things Bill Clinton did. His foreign policy identical.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's insane. Well, Trump did. I will say he is a little. I think his heart is not set to go to war as much as other presidents ever.
Yeah, I don't know. I think for re-election purposes,
he might go to war.
Yeah, that seems to be kind of like the thing
the
you
trend.
do. Yeah, the trick you do.
You got to start banging the war drums. But that's the one thing they all agree on is that war is that when Trump is bombing Syria or wherever. That's when the media all of a sudden says he's never looked more presidential.
Mm.
But he also does it with bypassing Congress, which is an impeachable offense. Like it's not hard to find a reason to impeach him. But if you were to impeach Donald Trump on a solid base, then you would... I want to say it'd be too hypocritical because to look back at Obama, because Obama should have been impeached if that's the basis for impeachment, if that's what they decide, because ultimately the House, whatever the House says is impeachable. That's the rules. It didn't really matter.
Well, I'm afraid that's kind of what's going to happen. And I think the phrase for it is weaponizing the impeachment, that it's now like next time you have the majority of the House, a political party that's different than the president, they're just going to impeach him.
Yeah.
Because, they'll find something to impeach him with because they can. And here, since the Democrats don't have the Senate, they can impeach him, but they can't convict him.
Well, which is the case it's always been, too. I mean, I even... retroactively looking back now, I was actually too young. I was born in 94, so I wasn't around for much of, or cognitively there for much of Bill Clinton, but that's not really an impeachable offense what he did. You know what I mean?
Well, yeah, even Donald Trump, I think this week stated that he doesn't think Bill Clinton should be impeached.
He shouldn't have been. That's ridiculous. Like, it's his... Okay, so they got him lying. That's ultimately what it was. But think about what he's lying about. He's...
having sex in the White House, basically.
Yeah, and, like, he's supposed... Like, what... Very few men, when you ask them, even if they did, like, did you cheat on your wife? They're going to tell you no. I'm like, it's not like his character was that far removed from the average male. If it was like, did you gas all those civilians in Yemen, and he says no, and it turns out he did committed war crimes on that level, then that's super impeachable.
For sure.
That's human life. I guess that's where it kind of goes to me is like, I tend with the federal government and with our politics, I tend to not care about the issue unless there are actual human lives being not affected but like harmed. Because lots of things affect us. Like, I hate taxes. I hate them. I don't spend all my time just railing against taxes. I think it's theft. I think it's extortion from the government.
Right.
I don't think that's the most important issue. I think it's a crime against us, but it's not the most important issue.
Mm-hmm.
To me, ultimately, war is like foreign policy. There you go, is the most important issue because I think we have killed many people because of it. But so when the impeachment has nothing to do with anyone being physically harmed, I tend to just not care.
Mm-hmm.
There's no reason for me to get involved, and we've very much our what we consider important issues has changed, and the populace doesn't care if we kill. We've been carpet bombing the crap out of the poorest countries in the world for over 20 years, and the populace doesn't care if we. The populace doesn't care about that, but we're going to focus on whether Trump said something inappropriate on a phone call.
Right.
Like where's our priorities here? There has to be some basis. So, to take it back to a Christian perspective, because ultimately, in my opinion, what we're talking about doesn't matter if you don't have the Christian perspective. I don't care about the secular perspective.
So maybe we call that biblical worldview.
Yeah, biblical worldview. These people are made in the image of God, and life is sacred. And we have lost the sacredness of life as a culture, and I think it shows when we don't care about people dying. We truly don't care about people dying, and we'd rather watch Donald Trump just be removed from the White House. That's our dream, is to remove the president. Whether there was talk when Obama was that we should impeach him when he was elected. The Republicans are guilty of it too.
I think more than ever we're seeing the polarization. Like maybe not more than ever, but it's pretty obvious now.
I think the internet has helped.
Well, in media, it's pretty clear.
Well,
so we have a friend that walked in. His name's Kyle, and he's someone that we usually have conversations with, and so what do you think about the impeachment?
Well, what I was just thinking about, which was about the talk of whether or not Obama should be impeached, was talked about by Republicans, but they went through that, 10 to 14 years earlier with Clinton, and impeachment is purely a political act, right?
Yeah, it doesn't do anything else.
And
yeah, we had just talked about that. How this week Trump comes out and says that even Bill Clinton shouldn't have been impeached, and so maybe they're using impeachment a little bit too loosely. And but yeah, we did talk a little bit about Bill Clinton's impeachment and how that was politicized.
well, and so what I would counter, or not counter with that, but what I would add to that is the reason that Republicans didn't ever impeach Obama was because of what they learned in 1998. It soured people towards Republicans, but it actually was effective in the sense that for Republicans back in the late 90s, because then the election happened, and again you had a popular vote go to the Democrat, but the Republicans still won in effect. And I think that was because there was enough people who were soured on some of the scandalous things that were in the Clinton administration.
Well,
But they didn't think that there was sufficient scandal that's like the immoral that makes people feel bad or icky that Clinton was accused of, that in general people might say Obama did. He didn't do the types of things that people feel icky about that you go, yeah, impeach.
well, do you think that back then, because once again I need y'all's perspective since I was sucking my thumb at that time, and among other things, but so do you think that riled up the Republican base enough to get more votes, or do you think it just made, because I mean that's an interesting election. But you're right. The Republicans did win.
But that was the election where like every vote mattered. Right?
Yeah,
that was Bush.
Every
and
single
was
vote
that-
mattered.
Bush v. Gore. Yeah, it was Bush v. Gore.
Yeah, so that might be I don't know. The way I see it is that it might have mattered in that one is what I'm kind of thinking about now. I don't think it matters now, is because Obama won because he had 11 million more people, Democrats, vote. And I don't think 11 million people chose to not vote for Hillary because of her character, or chose to not vote for or chose to not vote for Hillary and then go vote Republican. I don't think that happens very much. I think they just didn't vote at all because they had 8 years in the White House, and that's what typically happens, is that the party that got comfortable because they won gets lazy, and then they get mad at the primaries, and then they usually win the House and the Senate back, but they didn't win the Senate, so that was interesting.
Well, bringing it back to impeachment and whether or not any of the two that happened in the last 22 years, or the proposed, like, we should impeach Obama, should or should not happen, in my opinion, all of the presidents should be impeached. And I don't know if you brought up that point yet, but they all should be impeached for all of the war crimes that they've committed. So have we said that yet?
It has been said before you were here, but I'm trying to decide when to get into that next topic, because our topics are impeachment and Iran. And
well, let me go back to your question about sucking the thumb. I was in high school when it happened, and so I was young still and learning a lot of different things. I grew up in Baptist evangelical home, and it was conservative and Republican. So you look back and you're like, oh, that's immoral, and so he should be impeached. That was kind of like the analysis. And it was immoral, the things that he did. I mean, he was. We know
absolutely.
that he committed perjury, but we also know that he committed consensual affairs.
Yeah.
And he has been accused of, with pretty strong evidence, of committing
ton of
assault and rape
and suiciding people.
Well, that that I wouldn't agree with, and so it is. That was my analysis back then. And then my analysis of another thing that Obama might have been impeached for was the IRS scandal.
Oh,
where
should have.
Where they
targeted conservatives.
And would
Fast and Furious.
Fast and Furious as well. And so again, you look at those things, but it's what impeachment is the political will of the people, right? Yeah. And so right now, the political will of the people is very split, which is actually right where I kind of jumped in on that DJ was saying. You're saying that we're very split, and it just is. I think we've actually always been split for a very long time. Yeah. It's just because for the previous 8 years, Democrats were in power, and they generally had the microphones, so to speak. I mean, podcasts weren't extremely popular. They controlled Hollywood. Unless you listened to Fox News, you were getting a left-wing bias. Even if it's just left of center, you were kind of getting that bias. And even if it was right of center, a lot of the things that conservatives find important, the people who are right of center disagree with those conservatives and will and side with people who are on the left side.
Well,
everything just seems so gray. How do we know that we have the right facts, that they're true? Because most of the sources are media, and so
who don't even name their sources anymore.
Right, and
even all it takes is one source, one anonymous source, to make a claim, and then they report it.
Right. Well, it's kind of like the whistleblower thing, right?
Yeah.
I mean, from my understanding, like the Congress just changed the whistleblowing standards that qualifies and protection for a whistleblower, and then a whistleblower comes out, and so all it takes is an accusation from some guy we have no idea who it is, and that's enough to start this whole avalanche to impeachment.
Well, what we're trusting, especially in the media, when CNN runs an article and it says one anonymous source, you're trusting one journalist. You're not even trusting like a whole organization. You're really trusting like a few people who want to say that this one anonymous source is reliable. It's not like it's on a small scale. You need to think about it not like, oh, they have the name of a news network behind them. Like very few people, like things get ran all the time. And that they have to be
you could
redacted.
just make up a source.
Yeah, you
know,
can.
and so, who knows? Like, I'm sure the whistleblower is a real person, but you could just make up one. You're accused,
so Scott Horton, one of my favorite people, whenever he has more than one source that he could possibly name, people don't take him seriously.
Well, and I feel like that Hollywood has assisted in this terribleness in the same way that what Jack Bauer assisted in us all going, well, yeah, if there's an atomic bomb, you need to torture a person, right? It's the same thing that when you're going, well, yeah, but if the person that you're taking down is evil, does it matter that you tell this lie to get to the next step, right? I just told this one little lie to get to the next step, which was that I had this source. Even though I couldn't prove it in a court of law, which does make a difference. I mean, there are things that go on where, again, this goes back to my one of my favorite lines in A Few Good Men, where Demi Moore is talking to Tom Cruise and be like, you know that that it was an order, that it was this and it was that, and he goes, well, it doesn't matter what I believe, it only matters what I can prove. So don't tell me what I do and don't know. I know the law.
Well, I think that's one of the fascinating things about the impeachment is that. Right now, the House managers are giving the opening remarks and also trying to add amendments to get witnesses to testify.
Yeah.
Well, if they need this evidence so bad, how can they even have impeached them?
Yeah.
It's like you already sent it over, and if the witnesses are so important to convicting him, how could you have even impeached them in the first place?
Yep.
And I don't know if you guys have talked about this yet, but I am taking it in the light of I'm assuming that everything that the Democrats are saying is true.
Really?
I'm not actually. I don't actually believe that, but in my mind, I'm like, well, assume that everything that they say is true. I still don't think it's I don't care.
Yeah. Even if it is true, it doesn't matter.
It amounts to nothing because that's all that politics is bartering and trading and doing this and that. Like everything a president does is always intended to get him reelected.
Well,
or her.
Yeah, I mean, because the big thing in leading up to the impeachment was, did a quid pro quo happen? Doesn't that happen? I mean, aren't you trying to get something?
All the time.
Isn't that part of making a deal? Well, you get something and I get something.
I don't want you to go too far into the definition of a quid pro quo because I have intentionally refused to learn what that is as a protest.
Well, we have a lawyer in our presence.
Well, I don't want to know what it is. I'm protesting the impeachment by not knowing what quid pro quo is.
All right, you cover your ears, and then the audience will want to know.
Okay, so my ears are covered.
All right, quid pro quo just means this for that. So simple.
So if I go to Walmart and buy something, that's quid pro quo? Like I give them money and I get something back?
Almost. You know what I would say is what's more of a quid pro quo is if you go to a restaurant and you sit down. Not a fast food restaurant, but a regular dining restaurant where you're going to sit down, you order, they bring you food, you eat it, and then you pay, right? I mean, the Walmart one is more concise, true, so I think that would work. But it's like there's the assumption that when you sit down and do all this stuff that you're not getting a free meal, you're getting... Cover your ears again.
They are. They've been covered this entire time.
You're getting this for that.
I find it fascinating right now. So it's going to be interesting whether they allow witnesses because the Republicans, if they're going to allow witnesses, they want Biden's son to testify.
Yeah.
Which is, if the Democrats ever agree to that, it's throwing Joe Biden under the bus.
Yeah, well, I think he's already done for. I don't know how they could even... I do not understand how you can watch him talk and still think that he's capable of winning a presidency.
Well, I really don't care about the impeachment, but I do want to know if Joe Biden got his son in a position in Ukraine. Oh, that's interesting to me. That's,
I just assume yes.
Me too.
But with Quid Quo Pro, I did have a thought. I wanted to get back to that real fast.
We hooked them.
You know
Say it right.
you know that was a term that they did some focus groups on, and they decided that was the words they're going to throw around that make Donald Trump look like he's done something bad, because people don't understand what it is. So they say, "Oh, that sounds like an impeachable offense."
Well, I don't even think it was that thought out.
I think it was.
I think it was like, oh, that's a good word. Let's throw it around.
No,
Let's use it.
well, the Bush presidency did a lot of that. And every word that you hear is very selectively chosen. So they switch it from the socialized healthcare. That doesn't work. Obamacare, that doesn't work. Medicare for all. That polls good when you say Medicare for all. That polls better. I think Quid Pro Quo polled negatively for Trump.
I think, well, no, positive. Like when they used it, people were not outraged by Trump, right? Okay, I see what you're saying. You're saying initially the people that they asked were like, quid pro quo, that's terrible.
Yes.
Because once it was rolled out, people were like, quid pro quo, what are we talking about here? This is ridiculous. They had to immediately switch it.
Yes.
To attacking your political opponent, or doing something like that. Because one of the other things is, they did the collusion, right?
Yeah. Which is not a crime.
Not a crime, but it just sounds so good. Now, here's the interesting thing between Democrats and Republicans is, as we know, on the radio and on YouTube, most political radio shows are conservative, and so it takes a slower amount of time to get the response done, because you're actually getting an explanation. Whereas on CNN, they do a 7-minute report of the quid pro quo, and then they do a 10-minute panel talking about how terrible the quid pro quo is, and then they might do 3 more minutes on historical quid pro quos that were bad, right? And so they've initially introduced this idea, whether quid pro quo or something else, to the people. And then it takes weeks actually for the conservative side. Now we all think that quid pro quo is kind of ridiculous, but assume something. It's benign, whatever it is. It's the boogeyman. It takes weeks for the conservatives to come up with their response and explain why it's not a quid pro quo, or why a quid pro quo is not a big deal, or the boogeyman's not a big deal.
Yeah.
Or this particular boogeyman's not a big deal.
That is something I hadn't thought about, is the slow response time. But
it's a slow response time, but because in general, people who tend to be conservative are often analytical about specific things. And I'm not judging one way or the other, like people are just different in that way, but you want to analyze to the points, and so it takes a little bit of time to do that and then to learn those arguments.
Well, I think another thing there is that one's on offense, one's on defense, right? So the quid pro quo argument was launched to attack, and then the Republicans are forced to respond to it, trying to understand what quid pro quo means. Why the fancy word? It's a scary word. It sounds complicated. It sounds legal.
yeah,
like a legal term. And when it's just, you made a deal.
definitely sounds like something Tom Cruise would say, I have to say.
Yeah, it definitely does. And he would say it awesomely, though.
He would. Well, I think Kyle has overstayed his welcome now.
I appreciate you guys letting me on. Now I got to go coach a bunch of 8-year-olds to another victory.
See you, Kyle.
Okay, so going on to I want to talk about Iran.
Okay.
I have mixed feelings about it, because I actually want to give Donald Trump a little bit of grace here. And you hear this often by other commentators, because we're grading on the curve of that he hasn't started another war. That's a good thing. But the fact that we're still in Afghanistan and have been there for 20 years, and like what's going on here. So I want to give him, and he said he'd pull out. He campaigned on pulling out of those wars.
Well, I mean, just a few weeks ago, there was this big hoopla about him pulling troops out of Afghanistan. And then all of a sudden, there was they started attacking because he's pulling his troops out. And the only way I knew about that was because the media presented it.
Yeah.
I think maybe a subtopic here is how much does the public really need to know about what's going on?
Everything.
Well, I know, but like I know as a leader that in a church,
Yeah.
when I used to pastor, there's some things that the rest of the church just didn't know and need to know.
Yes.
You know, like they don't need to know who I'm counseling. They don't need to know like a lot of things dealing with church strategy and I don't know. It seems like though, like with our president, everybody says, you know, we should know what's going on, and I don't think that's really a good idea for
Okay.
no matter who the president is.
Kind of. I see where you're coming from. Now, there are lots of decisions that never get brought up.
Well, like one of the complaints for Iran, for Trump going to Iran, is that he didn't tell anybody. He just decided to go and bomb this guy.
Okay, well, so it is against the Constitution to do that. A declaration. So that's what makes me mad. So that is a declaration of war. That is an act of war. You killed the general of another country, another sovereign country. And even on Joe Rogan's podcast, I had to listen to a guy go on there and make excuses for why that's not a declaration of war. I'm like, please imagine if anyone
Are we at war with Iran right now?
Oh, absolutely.
Like our troops are attacking Iran right now.
Not
They're
direct,
exchanging fire.
Not directly. Well,
Right.
well, they are. I mean, it depends on.
Yeah, there's stuff been going on between Iran.
There's lots of things going on. Yes.
But is that a war?
Well, yeah, I would have to say.
Are we at war with Russia?
Well, it depends. I wouldn't.
I mean, their ships are aggressively attacking our ships. So not attacking, but getting dangerously close. You know.
Well, I was going to say Russia backs Iran, so.
Oh yeah. Well,
so we could be at war with Russia now.
It's hard to tell, right? So it's proxy. And
no, I think there are lots of circumstances where it's hard to tell. In what world do we live in that killing the second in command of another country is not an act of war? You know what that did one time? It caused a world war. Like seriously, like this.
But even
insane.
in the World War, like let's just say World War II, there was an announcement: we're going to war. And
An official declaration of war. You know, right. The only reason, but this is so. America's military budget is bigger than the next 20 countries below us military budgets combined. Okay. Iran does not want to go to war with the U.S. They know they would lose. They know. So we're bullying them. And they're a poor country that we went in and we overthrew their democracy. We overthrew their government in the 60s and 70s. We ruined their currency. So even just blockading a country, by the way, is considered an act of war.
Okay.
We blockaded Japan before Japan attacked us. So we technically committed the first act of war with Japan. And so we put massive sanctions on them. We have the some of the poorest countries in the Middle East. Why do we care?
Well,
I
see the problem that
bombing.
I think you're getting at is that even the definition of war is skewed.
Yeah,
and we're affecting and impacting that country, and economically and with some military.
Yes.
And so the way you're defining it is that that's part of the war.
Yes, it's all part of the war with Iran. We've been, it's a Cold War, really. But with Trump killing that one guy, that to me, it just blows my mind out. The only reason we're not at war is because they know that it would be if Russia and China don't come to their aid, which they're not. We have way too. People say we have bad relations with Russia and China. We have way too good trade relations with Russia and China that they don't want to sacrifice it. So Iran's not worth it.
What I'm hearing is that the way that Trump and the Republicans are getting around attacking Iran is by the definition of what a war is.
Probably, yeah.
Right? So that's not really war, it's just killing a terrorist.
Yeah, that's what they say. That's what
Right.
they say. Like we didn't kill the general. We killed a terrorist. He's responsible for all these other deaths.
But is that true?
Okay, now.
So yeah, I know we're kind of switching a little
Well,
bit of gears
no.
here because was it right to kill him?
I don't think it was right to kill him. I do not think it was right to kill him.
Even though they say that he's killed people and American lives were impacted by what he's done.
Well, Obama had a hit list of Americans, so our government,
Sure.
Does similar things to what he's done.
Yeah. I won't debate
There's
that.
nothing that he's done that our government hasn't done. I guarantee it. That especially the CIA, that there's nothing he's done that the American government's not guilty of. We are just as guilty or worse than any of those countries over there with all their terrorist acts. We go carpet bomb the crap out of them for 20 years, and then they retaliate. They get mad, and then they are labeled a terrorist.
Well, yeah, we destabilize their government.
Destabilize their,
and then we're mad at the result that
Yeah.
comes out of it.
and then they get mad
Because that was kind of what
we
happened.
act like it's their fault.
Right. So that's kind of what happened after 9/11. Right. So
Well, 9/11
the result of
is the result of that.
well, and then there's even more results in that we go to war with Iraq,
Yes.
and then
Yes.
take Saddam Hussein out, and who was, I think everyone agrees that he was a tyrant.
But he was our best friend in
Right. A
beforehand.
result of something that we did from before.
Yes.
But
so,
now we destabilize, taking the leader out, destabilize the Middle East and Iraq, and then Al Qaeda comes in.
Yeah.
There's no he was a tyrant, but at
and now
least-
we negotiate. Now Al Qaeda, we fight along their side. We arm Al Qaeda now. It's insane. But with Soleimani or whatever his name was, there's nothing that we haven't done. So they say they're the most the number one sponsor for terrorism. That's what you're going to hear on Fox News all the time.
Okay.
Is that they're the number one sponsor for terrorism. And this is where I got to give, I get frustrated with the Democrats, is because that's not true. And they never
Point
just
that out.
say that's not true. So the Democrats, for some weird reason, do side with Iran more often. I don't know why, but they do. And so I'm like, if you point out that that's not true, this is a real easy thing. So they'll say that anyone backed that was ever armed ever by Iran. So if anyone's killed with a weapon that was armed by Iran, which ultimately was given to them by Russia, then that group, and if it's labeled a terrorist group, it may not even actually be in a different world labeled a terrorist group. That group is now a proxy to Iran. You know what I mean? They're acting on Iran's behalf. Okay, so let's hold us to that same standard. ISIS is an American-backed militia. That's what that means, is that ISIS, who America armed, the U.S. government started ISIS in trying to control the region and take out certain dictators they didn't want. So by that logic, we are a sponsor of terrorism.
Okay.
So we cannot. So it's simply a lie to say, because the standards, we're not holding us to the same standards as them. For some reason, the police, it doesn't matter.
Okay, so probably an equivalent of this during the Obama administration is going after Osama bin Laden.
Yes.
Was that right?
We
were done with the war. Primarily
yeah.
done with the war.
I have a hard time with these because I do think those situations are nuanced. I don't mourn the death of these guys. I don't think they're good guys. I think that's naive to assume that these guys are good.
Right.
But we killed Saddam Hussein how long ago? And that's the reason we invaded Afghanistan? What?
Well, the reason I remember was looking for weapons of mass destruction
That were Saddam's. That was also...
that they never found.
that they never found, that didn't exist, which WMD was also another thing that they, because it's vague on purpose. They did that in, they pulled that in groups and to see which ones scared the public. It's fear-mongering, which they never found, but that was code for anthrax too. That's what that was.
Okay.
WMD was actually code for anthrax. Some people think it meant nukes, but it didn't. Anthrax is really what it was.
Because
And
they were
there's a bunch of
putting
neocons.
they were looking for the Scud missiles.
So the only WMDs that were ever in the Middle East were missiles that we gave them. In the 80s, the Reagan and Bush gave Iraq mustard gas. And some of it's been lost.
And
some
that
of it's
was
been stolen.
help them fight Russia, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So they gave them mustard gas. We armed terrorists with something that we don't is a war crime to use. Like, this is insane. And then we act like they're the bad guys. What we keep doing is we arm them, we turn our backs on them, stab them, and then they get mad, eventually commit a horrible, heinous act like 9/11, and then we just use that as an excuse to go further into their country and the poorest, the poorest countries in the world. Like, what are we doing there?
Right.
When our military is more than 20 times the size of theirs, it doesn't make sense. It blows my mind. It's that we're killing all these people too. So Iraq didn't commit. No one in Iraq did 9/11, and like 1.4 million people have died in Iraq since the Iraq War.
Yeah.
Far less U.S. troops also, but we don't mourn the other people who, for this unjust war that we went into. Like, I wish we had a sanctity of human life. Like, these people matter. This is the most important issue.
Well, I think what you're kind of getting into is kind of looking at the bigger picture here as Christians and our role in the kingdom, that the kingdom really doesn't have the borders that we do.
Exactly.
And so we have the American perspective. We live here in Military Town, USA.
Yep.
And so when civilians die in Iran, Iraq, it's really like, how much care do we really have for them?
Basically none. So, like, even not too long ago, I've been reading this up. I should probably read some more. I'm sure there's another more recent incident, but this is like 3 months ago. We killed 40 pine nut farmers in Afghanistan. On accident, we killed 40 pine nut farmers, and other people were injured. That was, who's to pay for what happened? Like, they're essentially murdered wrongly for no reason, and they hate us over there. Why do they hate us? We act like it's a confusing thing.
Well, we have school shootings here, and
3 people die,
right,
and it's a national tragedy.
Yes, it's huge, but we go kill
40 in one day.
40 pine nut farmers.
Or even whenever, bomb fragments from Lockheed Martin are discovered to have blown up a wedding or a school bus full of children. And no one pays for these injustices and crimes because we're Big Brother in Middle East. I cannot believe, and the fact that we've lost the war, because we have a war on ideology. You can't just kill all terrorists. And they keep expanding the definition of who's a terrorist. And I mean, like, they're like goat farmers from Afghanistan have been holding off the American government for 20 years. Goat farmers who are illiterate, who have AK-47s from 1947 that got there by the Russians, are still holding off the American government. And that it's so far that we negotiate with Al-Qaeda and people like that. We have lost the war. Why do we need to be there? Why do we need to get into when do we learn our lesson? When do we learn that going into Iran is a terrible idea?
Well, I think, is that baked in the cake now, where like are we responsible now for the results of our actions? Shouldn't we stay because of our government's bad decision to go in there in the first place and try to spread democracy and all this stuff? Do we have a responsibility there to try to protect? I don't know. One side.
Fix what we
I don't
did.
know.
Just fix it. You
Yeah,
gotta stay and fix it.
which is impossible.
That's the argument that they use to stay. Which, guess what?
Right.
Commits more. You know what I mean?
Right.
It just makes it worse.
So
Foreign intervention just makes it worse every time.
So I mean,
We trade one dictator for a worse dictator.
The killing there, the people dying is baked in the cake. Because if the government leaves, then they're going to start killing each other because they're going to fight for the power.
Yes. Yes.
The
we
vacuum.
destabilized them. Yeah.
Right. And so it's kind of like, this is the damage we've done.
Well, and people say, if we pulled out, it'd be too many consequences. It'd be a horrible thing if we pulled out. I agree. There would be lots of consequences if we pulled out of it. I don't know if it's any worse than what's happening right now. As far as atrocities happening over there. Yes, there are going to be consequences for us pulling out and not having a military presence there. But we never should have been there in the first place.
It's kind of like
how did we operate for so many years without it?
It's kind of like a self-fulfilling prophecy here.
Yeah.
It's it's one of my favorite themes that I saw in Star Wars, that we see, like, we went there to try to get rid of what we thought was evil.
Yeah.
And the result is we got evil in power.
Exactly.
And so, like, in Star Wars, we see that it's like the formation of Darth Vader.
Yes.
He had dreams, if you remember in Star Wars.
Yeah.
He had dreams that his wife Padme was going to die. And so he basically turns to the dark side in order to try to save her.
But that's what killed her.
Yeah, and so he ends up killing her. He
Yeah.
ends up being the instrument to kill her.
Yeah.
And then it's repeated, the theme's repeated later on when Luke Skywalker sees the evil that Kylo Ren's going to do.
Yeah, yeah.
And then so he's about to strike him down.
Yeah.
And he doesn't, but that action of about to strike him down is what causes him to go evil.
Yep.
And so it's the self-fulfilling prophecy. It's like the prophecies they had, they were going to be the ones that brought it into place.
So my favorite scene in Star Wars, well, actually, I don't know my favorite scene. My favorite scene, politically speaking, in Star Wars is when Palpatine is bragging about democracy after he's just used democracy to become a tyrant. And he says, "Oh, I do love democracy." Seeing that coming out of Palpatine's mouth.
And then Padme says, this is how democracy dies.
Yeah, yeah.
By applause.
Yeah. And but we keep saying we use democracy in Iraq or in the Middle East as like a key word. It's like it's democracy, democracy. We gotta save democracy. And every time we set it up, it's just corrupt and evil. And
So are we experiencing that right now with Donald Trump?
oh yeah,
It's like he's now the emperor. And everybody's applauding him. And
well, even what Putin did, so he's always for a long time he's been the leader of Russia, but they do have term limits and things.
And he's the president.
Yeah. Well, I think he just recently stepped down to prime minister, but he rearranged things so our prime minister has more power. And so now he has more power, but he needs to maintain the appearance of a duly elected official for public reasons and to stay good in the court of public opinion. And so that's all they use democracy for. Democracy is good at one thing, providing a hiding place for tyrants. That's all it does, is it gives them a good place to hide. We have the same totalitarian things happen in America as they do in, name your socialist country that doesn't have elections or something. Like the same things get done, just with the illusion that we voted for it, because we vote for them to go make the decision a lot of the time. It's not even that we voted for it. It's not like it's, the leaders don't really, if you have a tyrant leader, it doesn't matter if they were voted in or not. It just doesn't matter. But we think that democracy is going to save the Middle East with these people that are extremely uneducated, most of them, and when we've made them that way too, possibly our foreign policy has made it where these are war-torn nations now, and then whenever we do set up a democracy, and then they elect the person we didn't want them to. Oh well, we got to start all over now. We got to redo this democracy thing, and we got to invade. We declare them a terrorist, go invade. But war is definitely baked in the cake for us. For especially that there are kids fighting in Afghanistan right now that the war started before they were born.
Mm-hmm.
And if you in the media, if you don't support the President Trump bombing anyone or any president bombing
You're
anyone,
unpatriotic.
You're unpatriotic. Yeah. How dare you question that? You're not allowed to have that opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Anti-war. You're not allowed to be anti-war. In the Democratic Party, who Obama dropped way more bombs than Bush, used to be the anti-war party. And now they that's the one thing that's always bipartisan is war. We're always okay with flippantly going to bomb countries.
Well, that seems to be something baked in the cake in the evangelical church.
Oh, absolutely.
That there's this just war theory.
Well, I do believe in St. Augustine's just war theory.
Okay.
What are you talking about?
That
our own just war theory? Our own version? Now, there are different just war theories. I agree with St. Augustine's.
That it's okay to go to war if it's just.
I do think there are just reasons to go to war. I say I'm anti-war. In today's political landscape, I'm extremely anti-war.
But, this idea of justice, of being a just war, that can be subjective.
Yes. So that's why there's different theories on it. Some people disagree on what makes a war just. And I think St. Augustine's is the Christian perspective, which is, we should probably say this for a different one because it's Christian nonviolence. That's what it is. It's Christian pacifism.
Okay, explain his just war theory.
Well, that's a long discussion because he has 5 points that, another 5-pointer. He has like 5 points.
That's why you like it so much.
That all have different... it gets into the nitty-gritty. It gets in a lot of details on how many civilian deaths are okay, things like that. And what's interesting is a lot of the times to avoid war, the answer might be conquered. Let them conquer you. If your rebellion is not acceptable in just war theory, lots of things.
Well, that would be interesting because I think what we see, and I think we can agree, that the church is growing the fastest in places where, they don't have the best governments.
Yeah.
They have tyrant leaders. They're being persecuted, yet the church is growing the fastest there.
Uh-huh.
And so I think that would be evidence that in the big scope of things, when we're talking about God's kingdom, that does it really matter what kind of government you're in?
Exactly.
I like talking about political things because it's fun, but in no way do I want to apply that this is God's, read
into it with God's hand of wrath.
Yeah. Why can't we just say that, it's like we're doing this and God may not approve of it?
Yeah. Well, so in what we see, in which I keep...
But it feels like in church circle, evangelist church circles, that we have to justify it, so we feel good about what we believe about it.
It's like you have to justify the atrocities that the American government does, because if you're not patriotic, you're not Christian in America. Mm-hmm. That's the way they see it, which is just horrid, and it's becoming less and less a thing on a large scale, but it's like the ones who still believe that are getting worse.
Or they're vocal.
Yeah, they're the very vocal minority, and even that type of foreign policy, like to save Israel, to speed up their eschatological view.
Well, I think that's one of the arguments about going to war in the Middle East is to protect Israel.
Israel. A
And
lot
that's
of
like
it.
a dispensationalist thinking, right?
Yes, that's a huge part of it, and it's just that's bizarre because even with Israel, they are a secular government. Their government does not really, I mean, they're liberal by every American standard. They're not living in any biblical way. I don't
Well,
want to say
and
Christian way, but biblical.
even if it's true that, like they're right, like the dispensationalists are right about Israel,
Let's protect.
God protects them.
Exactly.
And
Exactly.
it's yet we feel like we have to be God's arm of justice here.
Yeah, and make the decisions for him too, and speed it up. But like we see that in the Old Testament very very clearly that God. So let's pretend America is casting judgment on these nations in the Middle East. Let's just assume that, just like the Assyrians did to the Northern Kingdom, and then God punished the Assyrians for their own injustices. Who's to say we're not next? The only thing that I'm on the fence on about this is, so ultimately Jesus judges individually. So does God judge nations still?
Oh, well,
if Jesus ultimately judges individually, because I'd much rather be judged as an individual, so other people aren't suffering for my sins. But God, in Scripture, we do see judges nations.
Yeah, and
does He do it now?
I always go back to kind of the definition of nations, because for us it's a land separated by borders.
Yeah.
And I don't know if God, the land itself, maybe there's some minor exception with the promised land, Israel, Canaan, things like that. It's a group of people.
Yeah.
A nation is a people. Israel was a nation before they got their land.
Yes.
They were God's chosen people.
The way I see it now is like, because the Christian kingdom has no borders. It is people.
Right.
That's the only way you can define it.
Well, and then
it's God's chosen people.
In the Bible, we're told that every tongue, tribe, and nation, representatives from every tongue, tribe, and nation are going to be before God, praising Him. And so there is this distinction between like people and tribes, but I don't know. Like when we look at tribes, like my son is native. In Africa, we saw this quite a bit, that there's the national borders, like there's a national border for Uganda. You can see the shape on a map. But even within Uganda and the surrounding countries, there's tribal nations. They have their own like kings, their own, and their tribes. And so my son happens to be Cree, but the Cree border goes into the United States and into Canada. And they're able to travel freely through the border.
Oh, that's
and so, the tribes thing is kind of interesting itself because the kings have borders that for their tribes that go around or go through national borders.
Yeah.
So politically, you recognize a nation, but tribally, they have different borders, and there's more tribes in Uganda than there is that one nation. So it's like, and if I'm not mistaken, I could be wrong, I think it's like over 100.
Yeah.
And they each have their own king and prince and, and chief, or, they have their own leadership within the tribes.
Yeah.
This is like, like in Rwanda, the battle was within the country, but it was between tribes, right? The Tutsis and I can't remember the other tribe.
Yeah.
But they were fighting against each other within the country.
Yeah, so it looks like a civil war.
Kinda.
Looks like.
Yeah.
To us.
Right, but it was a fight between tribes.
We should have a discussion on secession too.
Well, it's like that in Iraq.
Yeah.
Too, right? So the Sunnis,
100%.
They have different leaders within these little tribes.
Yes.
The Sunnis, is that what God's looking at? The tribes, like
it could
the political boundaries.
Well, it does come down to. I try to remind people whenever they're casting whenever they're reading into the political landscape and how God is judging and things like that, I'm like, just remember, because it kind of sounds like they're trying to judge. They're trying to say what God is doing.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, just remember that you should be glad that God is judging you and not other men. Because they're men. It seems like they're acting like men judging them. Like, well, God is who judges you, but he also judges them too.
Mm-hmm.
So don't be so proud about, you thinking your opinion about this country is what God's doing. Because if it's wrong and you invade it and bomb it, let's say if that one person could be responsible for all of that, well, you got a lot of judgment coming your way too.
Right. And if God's got control, then we don't need to be.
Yes.
Like we can trust him to be able to defend himself.
Exactly.
To defend his own honor and glory. And, we need to be real careful because God works in ways we least expect.
Exactly.
And we think we have it figured out, but we don't know the mind of God.
And he acts in ways that we don't want. But it is better. He does things that Jesus coming. The Jews wanted a savior from the Roman government, and they got a savior. They got the savior they needed. They got the savior that the most perfect, fulfilling, the best savior they could ever ask for.
They got a king for a new kingdom.
They got a king forever that'll reign above every other king. It's not the king they wanted.
Right.
Yeah, so we need to be real careful about looking at all that stuff. Really, my takeaway is that just as Christians, let's say we disagree on everything in the Middle East, like, don't be afraid whenever you can clearly see something as an injustice, to, even if it goes against the grain, it makes some people mad, to not identify with it, to not support it.
Right. Well, I mean,
not that you're going to go, do some political thing against it, but just don't support it.
Yeah,
Identify with your kingdom in Christ.
Yeah, I don't think we have to enter into the debate.
Exactly. You don't even have to enter in. Just don't support
This
it.
is why I say I'm apolitical.
Yes.
And we don't have to take a side. I know there's this. I know there's this pressure that you got to do your thing. Your
have
role.
To vote for Trump.
Right.
Hillary. The other evil's worse. You have to vote. Well, why commit evil at all? If you think voting for, if you know you don't like Trump, and he's a terrible candidate, and Hillary's a terrible candidate, just don't vote.
Well, I think that's
just for your own moral conscience. Just don't do it. You don't have to choose an evil thing.
Well, we can do, I think, what Jesus was teaching us, to focus on the kingdom of God. Seek first his kingdom, and God's going to put in place the leadership of this country, and that's his sovereign hand on that. I think that's the Romans chapter 13 thing, that
whether we voted it or not.
Right. And whether we're being persecuted or not, whether we have a tyrant government or a democracy, all of it's under God's hand to accomplish his ultimate purposes.
Yes.
And all we have to do is be faithful to him. And when we see Jesus, he says, love one another. We can be safe living a life loving one another. And, where it gets wishy-washy is where we enter into this kind of political thing, and we don't know for certainty.
Yeah. Well, as we talk about this stuff, I think how when we first had the idea for this podcast, that we weren't sure how much our Christian opinion would get spoken, or let's just give our honest opinion, not try to give the Christian opinion.
Right.
But it seems I enjoy it more. It's that it naturally comes out, that it's not forced, that it's impossible for me to look at a lot of these things without my Christian opinion, and hopefully holding up the Bible as my
right.
my
the ultimate,
inerrant source, ultimate authority.
Well, like even talking today, like in the back of my mind is, what if one of our congregation members hears this in San Antonio, where we're a military city,
yes,
and what I say offends them. Well, I'm okay with that. I guess in general,
I want to be okay with it.
yeah, I mean, it's, I'll probably be, at some point, I'm sure I'm going to say something that is, that somebody's going to talk to me about. But I think that's okay because it continues the conversation.
Yeah.
And, there's some ideas in the church that are so baked in the cake that I don't know. I don't think I have to be afraid. If I'm wrong about something, if I got the information wrong, and then that's okay. I'll change. I'll adjust my opinion. These are opinions. They're my thoughts on I think Christian living and to the best we can understand it.
I hope that I don't think the people who would listen to this podcast are the type to get upset over a lot of those things, over differing opinions.
Mm-hmm.
But I hope that if they were, and they hear me questioning the war in Afghanistan or whatever it is, that they would hear me questioning it, not damning the people who are participating in it for who they think they have their own reasons.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I may not agree with that, but I hope that they can agree to disagree with me just as I am willing to do with them.
Right.
I don't want to think of them as any different because I don't want to act as their judge.
Mm-hmm.
Is their conscience with them and God, and if that's good, then it's not up to me.
Yeah, that's kind of one of the crazy things about the Christian faith, right? Is that we're always being sanctified, and
we're at different places.
Yeah, it's a journey, and so I'm hopefully I'm not at the same place spiritually a year from now where I am now.
Yeah,
and hopefully I've grown and matured a little bit, and I think Jesus wants to continue shaping us a little bit at a time in our sanctification, and we're each taking our own journey, and our experiences have shaped our worldview and the way we see things. And, we just got to be civil to each other, nice to each other, and respectful, love one another.
And understand that we, expand our own versions of allowable opinion. That whenever you see, it's easy to say it. We as Republicans, not as Republicans, I'm not a Republican, but most Republicans say that about the left all the time. Like, we can't have conversations anymore. We can't have civil discussion. But if you bring up the right subject, they don't want to have it either.
Right.
It's just the different subjects. One might be worse at it, but
right.
We're all guilty of it. I'm guilty of it. So I hope that these conversations, if they listen and they don't agree, they just think.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, I know nothing.
At the end of you're right. We know nothing. And with the internet, we learn more and more and more. We know nothing about what we thought we knew. And then when we were with the Bible, we read and we realize we know even more nothing. And
right.
Yeah, we misunderstand things all the time. And, just give each other grace in everything that we do.
Right.
So I think that's going to be it for today's show. I am looking forward to our next ones. We may talk about, like I said a minute ago, Star Wars, secession, or even the elusive topic of DMT, if you know what that is. So leave a comment if you have a specific interest in any of those.
Or ask questions.
And ask questions. Yeah, we might answer your questions. It might help us get